Let me share you my full screen. Okay, let's start. We've got one last section for the midterm exam, and that is ethics. Yeah, I think we should be able to cover everything in terms of ethics today. So we will have time for me to go through the midterm exams and so on to give you the details and to answer any of your questions if you do have any questions. I think you will have more time than that, so maybe extra time to be able to cover the modern business model, which pretty much we started last week. Okay, we'll start with the lecture first, finish off ethics, and then we'll cover the details in terms of midterm exams, what to expect, and maybe I'll give you some hints along the way as well in terms of the midterm exams. So let's begin. Last week, we talked about social entrepreneurships. So let's just quickly go through, just to kind of a short revision, summarizing what we kind of covered during last week's social entrepreneurships. So pretty much social entrepreneurships, main difference between social entrepreneurships and normal entrepreneurships is with social entrepreneurships, it covers both a personal values as well as some kind of social values as well. So there's not much difference other than not only you can make profit or you can be profitable or make personal value when it comes to social entrepreneurships, but it needs to include some kind of social added value. And we kind of cover what we mean by social values, and social values can be one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas of relating to societies and so on. Environment, energy, both are very similar. One is more in terms of energy efficiencies and more in terms of reducing fossil fuel and so on. Whereas the environment can cover quite a large area other than energy itself. We can cover pollutions in terms of things like heavy metal or toxic or other environmentally, in terms of nature environments and so on, protecting and preserving environments as well. So environment kind of cover a much larger area, and energy is just a subset of the environment itself. Societies and so on also, or social business or social enterprise can also cover things like fair business practices, as well as human resource, community-related enterprises, as well as product and safeties and various other information relating to the products itself. We also kind of covered that social enterprise can be one of 3 different forms. Yeah, so the social obligated are the minimum of the social forms, in the sense that it obeys everything to the letter of the law and nothing more. Whereas the social responsibility and so on, in general, will be a little bit more active compared to obligation, and will actively find and do social programs and so on as well. And then there's the social responsiveness. Yeah, so in addition to obeying by law and being active, social responsiveness will be proactive to social kind of programs and so on. So it's a little bit more step further. So social or social enterprise can be at different level as well. We cover one major area of the social enterprises, and that's to do with the environment. Okay, the environment also includes energy and so on as well, yeah, because energy savings and so on helps reduce the carbon dioxide or carbon footprints and help with the environment in addition. But in general, we talk about environments and various different methods and so on for enterprise, for all social enterprise to be able to be more environmentally friendly. In terms of recyclings, make things which are accountable, in terms of making price reflect costs, eliminating waste, promote diversity, and more, very, very important, if you make it profitable as well, you kill two birds with one stone, not only environmentally friendly, but also very profitable as well. And a lot of industry are profitable and also socially, environmentally friendly as well. Things like wind power and solar power and other kind of related kind of industry can be highly profitable all around the world, especially in Vietnam, which is a tropical country. We do get exposed to the sun because we're nearer to the equator. In addition, we also have wind power from the South China Sea as well, very similar to Europe. In Europe, where they have the North Sea, in Vietnam we have the South China Sea, which can be quite a lot, can produce quite a lot of wind as well, solar. And about insisting on accountability of not only yourself or your company, but also the whole country or the whole nation and so on as well. So that's social entrepreneurships. Now we're new topic, which is the ethical side of entrepreneurships. Hopefully in the next few slides, we will try to cover why ethics is important, especially in business, and especially with entrepreneurships and startups. And what exactly, hopefully we'll cover also what exactly represents the so-called right and wrong in terms of conducts, as well as how do we develop our own code of conduct as well, yeah, which is getting more and more popular nowadays, and how we implement code of conduct within the organization or the enterprise itself. And we'll also cover what impact does not only integrity, but also ethical conducts have on, in terms of creating successful startups or enterprises or ventures. So let's begin. I think most of you, will have to study ethics. I think it's compulsory at least in the international management as well as business management department. It's a compulsory topic, and some of you might have covered ethics already, or might have studied ethics already. But for those who haven't, we'll try to summarize everything up. In terms of startups and so on, there are differences, but hopefully the stuff which you'll cover in the ethics course, hopefully it will also be here as well. So hopefully it will help you with this section as well. So what is ethics? Yeah. So ethics is a set of principles to describe a behavioral code that explain what is good or what is right or what is bad or wrong. Ethics may outline moral duty and obligation, and also it provides the basic rules and parameters for conducting any activities in a acceptable manner. In business, it's very, very important because you're dealing with customers or business partners or suppliers. In general, when you deal with other people or other companies, yeah, you need to be able to do it in an acceptable manner, because if you don't, eventually people will not deal with you, or will not cooperate with you, or will not communicate with you. So ethics is very important. It's kind of an unspoken rules and regulation in which companies or even people operate, so that they can be in an acceptable manner, in the sense that if you're doing something wrong and so on, or you be nasty and so on, then people will stop talking to you or stop communicating with you. Whereas if you do things in the right way, in an acceptable manner, other companies or your suppliers or your customers and so on will continue to communicate with you. And in general, every one of us have some form of ethics. These are unwritten rules which pretty much you are educated by not only your friends and family or throughout school. So when you communicate with your friends and your family and your parents at home, or when you first go to school, a lot of these ethics, a lot of these so-called right and wrong, or things which are bad or good, and things are communicated to you. Yeah, these basic rules and so on are basically instilled in you in such a way that you know what's right and what's wrong, how to be good to someone or good to another company in such a way that they be good back to you. But if you do something bad at school or even at home, then your parents will tell you off, or your teachers or your friends at school will tell you off. So in business, it's pretty much the same thing as in your home or at school. If you are rude or if you're bad to other businesses, then other business will stop communicating with you, or maybe they even tell you that you've done something wrong as well. Yeah, so a lot of these things are kind of unwritten, and they are taught to you throughout your life, throughout your kind of experience communicating with other people, whether it's at home or at school or at work, or when you go shopping, or wherever you go in society and so on. A lot of these rules and regulations kind of communicate to you that there is a right way of doing things and there are a wrong way or an anti-social way of doing things as well. So the main reason for ethical conflicts, there are many interests that confront businesses as well as individuals, both inside and outside of the organization as well. And we will see later on that there is, when it comes to ethics and so on, or rules and regulation, there will always be some conflict of interests or conflict of ethical conflicts and so on. It's part of the real world is all about, and it's the way in which you have to deal with these ethical conflicts, to be able to navigate through these ethical conflicts, to show that you're good, not bad, or you're right, not wrong, and so on. But society and so on are constantly changing as well. So changes in values will be continuous. There will be the society morals and society norms, as well as reliance on a fixed ethical principle can be difficult at times as well, rather than an ethical process, or because ethics itself or society itself are constantly evolving. I mean, 10 years ago, we may not have smartphones, and in class and so on, people might not have smartphones and so on. Back then, there was no ethical way of how to handle your smartphones in class, or if it rings in class and so on, because there was no such thing 10 or 20 years ago. But as the world changed, as new innovation comes about, as tablets and mobile phones and smartphone comes about, and maybe in future, maybe it's not mobile phones, maybe it's augmented reality or virtual reality, or various different wearable glasses and so on might even change the way in which we treat technology and so on as well. So societies are constantly evolving, and hence a lot of these ethics of the rights and the wrongs and bads and the goods and so on needs to change as society change, as new technology come about and so on. So hence, relying on a fixed ethical principle can be a bad thing as such, and we need to go through some kind of ethical process or evolving ethics as newer and newer technology or newer and newer problems and issue comes about. Ethics is, there's a difference between ethics and law. The two are very, very similar but different. Yeah? Ethics is much wider, and in general, it tends to be focusing on more to do with positive things. If you do something good, then you're more likely to be rewarded. Whereas law, kind of related, they're not the same thing. If you do something against the law or illegal, then you're going to be punished. So one thing, ethics and so on, tends to focus on more in terms of positive, whereas laws and so on tend to focus more in terms of punishment if you break the law. Because of ethics and law are not interlinked, there are some overlapping, but they are not exactly the same thing. There are 4 different quadrants which can exist when we discuss about law and ethics. So we have this kind of a 4 quadrants which exist. Yeah? So on one dimension, we can plot ethical and unethical, or moral and immoral. And on the x-axis, we can plot legal and illegal. Yeah? So the first quadrant is the intersection, or where ethics, where it is both ethical and legal. Yeah? So certain rules, these so-called unspoken rules or regulation when it comes to ethical conducts and so on, happen to be in law as well. So that's in quadrant 1. Both not only is these ethical standards and so on, but it is also written in law as well. So that is quadrant 1. We also have other area as well. In quadrant 2, things which are ethical can exist, but it is illegal as well. And in general, a lot of the times, law tends to follow ethics. Yeah? So typically, the process goes in the sense that as people have some kind of rules and regulation when it comes to societies and so on, then the lawmaker will enshrine it, the ethics into law and write it down in the form of legal procedures and so on. So sometimes, in general, ethics comes first, and then slowly the lawmakers will write it in law as well. So sometimes, even though it's ethical, but it's not written in law, or something which has been written in law, but as society evolve and move away from older regulations and so on, it might become ethical to be present. In the past, it might be illegal, but it takes time for the law to change. So there will be situations where it might be legal, it might be illegal, but it can be ethical at the same time. In the third quadrant, there might be a situation where it is unethical, because law kind of is behind on time and so on. Even though it's unethical, it might be a situation where it is legal still, even though it's unethical. There's a lot of situations there, because as society change, ethics would change quicker. Ethics would change with society. with laws and so on, it takes time for lawmakers to be able to enshrine these things into law. So it follows behind. So sometimes things which are legal, as society change, it becomes it still stays legal, but it is unethical to do that. Maybe we'll go through maybe one or two examples as well, but let's go through the fourth quadrant. The fourth quadrant also exists where it is both unethical and both illegal. That's relatively quite obvious as such. Yeah, so something which is unethical, but then it's been enshrined in law as well, so it is illegal as well. So things which are ethical and legal, and also unethical and illegal, are relatively quite common in the sense that it's both enshrined in law, and it is societally ethical as well. Or in the fourth quadrant, things which are illegal in law, written down in law already, but in society also treated as unethical. So these two are relatively quite common as such. Both law and ethics are common, or unethical and illegal are common. Things which are more debatable are things which are ethical but illegal, or things which is unethical but legal itself. So sometimes as law change, as certain laws get removed from being illegal into something which is legal, or vice versa, as law change from something which is legal into illegal. So things like, I mean, in Germany as well as in Vietnam, like for example, nuclear power and so on, in the past it might be quite common and acceptable and ethical in terms of nuclear power, but after the tsunami in Japan and the nuclear meltdown in Japan itself, Vietnam as well as Germany have changed with society as well as nuclear power becomes unethical. But then, back then, Germany still had nuclear power plants, and Vietnam was still planning to set up a nuclear power plant to help with electricity production and so on. But as society considers it unethical and so on, eventually lawmakers come about and enshrine in law to remove nuclear power and so on. So things which might be legal and so on, but as the law change, as society change, as nuclear power becomes unpopular or unethical, it takes time for law to catch up, to be able to enshrine in law that Vietnam as well as Germany stop using nuclear power or stop using nuclear power station as production for power. That's an example which is unethical, but was still legal, but now is legal. Germany is phasing out nuclear power, and Vietnam stopped pursuing nuclear power itself after the 2010 tsunami. That situation, especially in quadrant 2 as well, things which are illegal, but becoming more and more ethical as society changes as well. In a lot of countries, especially the US, and now in Europe as well, they're talking about legalizing cannabis, for example. So cannabis is still illegal in our country, but slowly as society change and as ethics become and society become more acceptable in terms of use of cannabis in terms of medical as well as helping other things and so on. From country to country, they're beginning to legalize cannabis as well. So it might be ethical, and society change, and usually society would change faster than the law itself. So it takes, in some countries, it takes quite a bit of time before the law will catch up and become to allow to legalize certain things as well. So in general, ethics change much faster with society, because these are kind of unwritten rules and so on. Whereas law itself, or things which are legal or illegal, needs to go through a process of legalizing or illegalizing itself to be able to enshrine it into law and to allow enforcement and so on as well. So it takes time for law to be able to do that. And within corporate decisions and so on, within startups and so on, it's the same thing. It's not just nuclear power and legalization of cannabis and so on. There are lots of rules and regulations, especially in corporation as well. Nowadays, especially with the whistleblower in terms of Facebook and so on, in terms of what they, how they do things recently, are becoming a big discussion in terms of ethical or non-ethical, and a lot of governments start thinking about making it into law as well, how social networking and Facebook should be treated when it comes to information and so on, especially in developing countries. Let me just change this, give me a moment. Change color, let's see, here we go. So type of morally questionable acts, yeah, so here we differentiate morality or ethics in the setting of enterprises or corporate or even ventures within companies itself. The kind of ethics which are non-role, or morality which are non-role, which is against the company itself, example as such as expense account cheating or embezzling, so hence it's against the company, you're actually stealing from the company, or stealing supplies, these are against the company itself. Not necessarily, a lot of these are enshrined in law as well, and things like expense account cheating is relatively quite grey area itself. How do you define that itself? Whereas embezzling is within enshrined in law itself, and stealing is enshrined in law. So some of these things can be grey in the sense that it's kind of like unspoken rules and regulation, but then some of them are both enshrined in law as well as unspoken regulation as well. Other types include role failures, so also against the company. Things like superficial performance appraisal from bosses on to increase promotion or even bonuses and so on. It's relatively quite grey in the sense of how do you prove it. On a non-confronting expense account cheating, in terms of how do you, it's relatively quite grey as well. How do you kind of define that in law as well, or payment of poor performance with inflated prices. So again, many of these kind of examples are on the grey area itself, that not written anywhere in law as such. Well, it depends from country to country. Maybe in certain country it is enshrined in law itself, but other countries, a lot of countries, a lot of these things are not, pretty much not defined, and pretty much it's just unspoken kind of regulation as such. There are the other types as well, such as role distortion. This is for the companies, yes, sometimes it's against the companies. These kind of role are positive for the companies, so things like bribing to be able to win contract for the companies. In a lot of countries, this is illegal, including Vietnam. Things like price fixing as well as manipulating suppliers as well. These can be helpful for the company, but in terms of ethics and law and so on, it might be against, it could be illegal as well as, it could be, but it is illegal as well as unethical as well. And then there are role assertion as well, which are positive for the companies, things like invested in maybe South Africa, maybe not necessarily during apartheid and so on, maybe it's not a good thing. Maybe in Palestinian area, to make it a little bit more relevant these days. Palestine, for example, control or Israel control Palestine. And so these things are debatable, whether it is apartheid or not. Israel control Palestine, for example. So it's difficult to say what's right and what's wrong, what is moral, what's immoral, but it's difficult to say. Depends on which side the equation you sit, whether you sit on the Israel side of the equation or you are sitting on the Palestinian side of the equation, is it's still a very debatable area itself. Other examples such as using nuclear technology for energy generation. So both Germany and Vietnam, that is really quite clear now that Vietnam will not be using nuclear technology for energy generation. And in Germany, nuclear generation, if anything, it will slowly phase out. So there is no more nuclear power, future nuclear power, not at the moment anyhow. Maybe things will change in the future, but at the moment, ethics or the current view of society is no more nuclear technology after the Japan nuclear meltdown. Not withdrawing product line in face of initial allegation, inadequate safeties and so on. So for companies, there's a lot of example of these throughout the Vietnam market or the European market as well, especially to do with food safety and so on. When there are certain chemical in the food itself, but the companies are not withdrawing the products from the market itself. So, example, packet noodles here in Vietnam recently, and in Europe, the tainted horse meat in beef and other meat products and so on, which happened quite a few years ago. Matters of morality. So ethical conducts may reach beyond the limits of the law. The two are not exactly the same. Ethics and so on, society will change quickly. It takes time for something to be to reach the lawmaker and to enshrine it into written law books or regulation. So the two are slightly different. So they're not necessarily the same thing. So requirement of law may overlap at time, but do not duplicate the moral standard of society. And societies are constantly changing. So things which are morally or ethical today, maybe tomorrow it might not be ethical as such as nuclear power, for example. Once it was ethical and moral, but after the nuclear meltdown, it becomes unethical and immoral, for example. Societies in general tend to change quicker, and it takes time for law to be able to catch up. Legal requirements tends to be negative or forbidden acts as such, whereas morality or ethical tends to be more positive and encouraging act. That if you are nice and good, it encourages you to do more of that, whereas law tends to forbid people to do certain things. So it's slightly different in the way in which it's evolved, the two of them, both law and morality or ethics. Legal requirements usually lag behind the acceptable moral standard of society. In both directions, don't forget that things can be illegal first, but moral before the law catch up, or it could be vice versa. It can be legal now, but immoral, even though it is legal. So things like, for example, nuclear power, it is legal, but nowadays it is immoral or unethical to use nuclear power to generate power, for example. And there are inherent problems arise when people believe law represents morality as such. Yes, so we kind of looked at social entrepreneurships and so on, especially the social obligated companies. Just because you are obeying everything by the law does not mean you are you're adding social values. Yeah. So just because something is legal does not means it helps society as such. Because societies are constantly changing, morality are constantly changing. And things can, even though legal today, but tomorrow it could be illegal. And vice versa, things which are illegal today, tomorrow it could be legal because society will change. So things inherently problem arise when people believe that law represents the ethics or the morality of societies. Moralities and societies and ethics constantly changing all the time. So there is an overlap between moral standard and legal requirements, and these four different areas. Yeah, the moral standard, legal requirements. There is an overlap, the intersection, things which are not only moral or ethical, but also legal. But there's also a fourth section. The fourth section outside of these two circles, so things which are immoral and unethical, and illegal as well. So careful when you look at this. Most of you probably can see only three sections. This section here, moral standard, legal requirements, this section here. The intersection in between, both moral or ethical and also legal, this section here. But then there is the fourth quadrant, which is outside. Outside here, which are things which is unethical or immoral as well as illegal. Yeah, so this diagram here should be the same as this diagram here. Yeah, there are four quadrants, ethical and legal. That is pretty much the gray area in this diagram here. Things which are ethical but illegal are this area here. And things which are legal but immoral or unethical are this particular section here. And quadrant number 4, things which are unethical and illegal are the area outside of this two circle, or sometimes known as, they call it the Venn diagram. So be careful when you look at this particular diagram. There are 4 quadrants, reflected in the 4 quadrants, what we see here. Yeah, ethical and legal, ethical but illegal, unethical but legal, and unethical and illegal. Yeah, so 4 quadrant represents the 4 quadrant here. 1, 2, 3, 4 inside. So why does an ethical behavior exist? Yeah, it can exist because of various different reasons. Things like greed is one reason. People are just greedy and they do things unethical things to be able to profit or to be able to advance themselves, or because they do unethical because distinction between activities at work and activities at home, that they override each other, as well as lack of foundation on what ethics is. And don't forget, if people are born in different part of the country, they're going to have a different kind of ethics set to you, yeah, because you learn your ethics from your home, your parents, your brother, your sister, your family, and your friends teaches you what is right and what is wrong. Same as school, but not all schools are the same, and not all home are the same, not all parents are the same. Yeah? Each one of us have a different set of ethics, even though most of it overlaps each other, but there might be differences, and it all depends on the where you learn it from, or the foundation where you are from as well. So the lack of foundation on what is right and what's wrong when it comes to certain topics or certain things which affect society. Other reasons for unethical behavior are kind of because of survival, or because of bottom line thinking. It's about necessities and so on in certain areas as well. And another unethical behavior reason is a reliance on social institutions to convey as well as reinforce ethics, and not because of the individual itself. But it takes both society as well as an individual to make things ethical and so on. And so it's blaming on the others. Yeah? It's not me, yeah? It's the institution. So those are the reasons for unethical behaviors. And there may be more, but some of these are the main reason for unethical behaviors in most people. So what do you do about it? What do you do to prevent this unethical behavior, especially in your venture or in your startups? Yeah? You need to do something about it. Yeah? And there are ways to do things about it. In business, such as the code of conduct. Yeah? So typically, when you work for a company, you have a employment contract. In the past, when I worked in Europe, in the United Kingdom, and so on, part of my labor contract, there's also an appendix on code of conduct. How do I conduct myself when I am at the companies, and where it also defines certain ethical behaviors and so on at the companies itself. But when I came to Vietnam and so on, that is not part of the university labor contract itself. But nowadays, more recently, the school of business has had written separately a code of conduct, how lecturers should behave at the university itself. Yeah, so it becomes more and more popular nowadays. It's one way to be able to enforce certain kind of standard or certain kind of ethical behavior at the workplace, is to include some kind of code of conduct within the employment contract, for example. So code of conduct is just a statement of ethical behavior or practices or guideline to which an enterprise or an employee adhere to. The code of conduct are becoming more and more popular as well as prevalent within enterprises as well as industry. So at the International University, it's more recently came about. In the past, there was no such thing as a code of conduct within your work contracts or within at the university itself. It's more reliant on ethical behavior of lecturers and individual But nowadays, like I said, a code of conduct has been written where everyone understand what these minimum code of conducts are and how to behave while you're at the university itself. So recent code of conduct are proven to be more meaningful in terms of external legal as well as social development, especially at the university, and more comprehensive in terms of their coverage as well, and easier to implement in terms of administrative procedures used to enforce them. So if anything, especially in kind of labor contracts and so on, when someone joined the companies, at least before signing the employment contracts, if the code of conduct is within the appendix of the labor contract itself, at least they know what is expected of them while they're at the workplace and so on. So it can be established there at the work contract or labor contract, or it can be separate as well. It doesn't have to be within the labor contract itself. At the International University, like I said, it's not part of the labor contract itself. It's just a separate document listing all the code of conduct distributed to the lecturers or the employees at the university as well. Yeah, so it can be one of two things. Part of some kind of legal document, such as a labor contract, or it could be a separate document, separate legal contract, separate to cover ethical behavior or moral behavior while at the place of work. Okay, let me just make some change here. Okay, so approaches to managing these ethical conducts or managerial ethics at organizations such as startups and so on. Organizational characteristic, things like ethical norms, motives, goal, oriented towards the law and strategy on how to do things. So you have three kinds of managers. You have the immoral managers, the bad managers. You have amoral managers, which is somewhere in between, and you have the moral managers, the management or the managers which are ethical and moral. Yeah, so immoral just means not or unethical. Amoral is somewhere in between. Moral just means ethical and good. Yeah, so bad, somewhere between good. In terms of norm, typical managers which are immoral have managing decisions as well as actions and behavior which imply a positive or active in terms of opposing what is ethical behavior or what is moral behavior. They're the opposite of what a good manager or ethical manager is all about. Decisions are discordant with acceptable ethical principles, and it's actively negating of any what is moral is implied. So pretty much that's what the immoral manager or management skill set is all about when it comes to managing enterprises. Amoral is somewhere in between. In general, managers is neither moral nor immoral, bad or good. But decisions lies outside the sphere of what or which moral judgments is about. These managers or their activities is outside and beyond the moral order of a typical code itself and lack the ethical perceptions as well as moral awareness. Yeah, so it's pretty much somewhere in between. Whereas the moral managers, yes, is the definition, what is all about. Actively conform to the standard, not only to the legal standard, but also to the ethical standard of what is right or what is good, their behaviors. In general, these managers will conform to acceptable professional standard of conduct or ethical leaderships, commonplace among these kind of managers. It depends on who you deal with and so on. And in general, especially when you deal with society as well as business and so on, you have to deal with not only your customers, but suppliers, your regulators. You have to deal with lots of other people, and that's what society and so on is all about. Be moral and so on, people will like to deal with you. Being immoral and so on, people will not like dealing with you. Yeah, they will defend themselves against you if you are immoral. But in society and in business and so on, you need to be able to deal with other people. So in general, being moral or being acceptable is a better behavior rather than unacceptable, and then people stop dealing with you. Reason why people are immoral, businesses are immoral, or managers are immoral, because of being selfish. Management care about its and its company's gains only, whereas amoral, somewhere in between, is well-intentioned but slightly selfish, impact others and is not considerate. Whereas amoral or good managers want to succeed, but only within the confine of sound ethical behavior. In general, other companies will want to deal with people who are moral as such. Yeah? So people who are fair, who believe in justice, who go through due processing rather than selfish companies in general. Yeah? So to deal with customers, suppliers and so on, I'd rather deal with these guys than these guys. So you run your own startup and so on, if you're selfish, less customers will approach you or less suppliers will approach you. Yeah? But if you're good to others in general in society, then others will be good to you and will enjoy dealing with you rather than avoid you with the selfishness. Main goal of immoral managers in general is profitability and success at any price, whereas the amoral, somewhere between, it is also profitability, but other goals are not considered. Whereas the moral managers in general, profitability is within the confine of legal opinions as well as ethical standard and society norms and so on. In terms of orientation towards the law, immoral managers, they're going to stick to legal standard. Our barriers in terms of management or managers must overcome these to accomplish what they want. Yeah. So they will try to push wherever they can. As amoral managers, the law is just an ethical guide, preferably operate up to the letter of the law, nothing more. And central question is what manager can legally do? Whereas the moral managers, they are obedience towards the letter as well as the spirit of the law as well. Yeah, so they will take a little step further. Law is just a minimum ethical behavior. There might be some things which we kind of looked at already, things which are illegal or lawful, but unethical as well. So law is not necessarily only the minimum and so on, or even the spirit. Sometimes certain laws are unethical as well. So this just because something which are legal does not mean it is ethical as such. So the managers will prefer to operate above what is legally mandated or even to things which are legal but things which is unethical, then moral managers will not do things like that. In terms of strategy, immoral managers exploit opportunity for corporate gains, cut corners when it appears useful to them, whereas amoral managers give managers free rein. Personal ethics may apply only if managers choose to respond to legal mandates if court required to do so. Whereas moral managers, good managers in general, tends to live by the ethical standards as such. You know, because legal or illegal, ethics in general is good, yeah, in that sense. So assume leadership position when ethical dilemma, and there will always be dilemma arise. And we'll go through the conflict between business and ethics and moral in a moment. There will always be ethics, and there will always be dilemma when it comes to ethics and business as such. And enlightened self-interest will prevail over other things. So in some way, it's to be able to not only, especially in business and ethics and so on, there is a holistic way of doing things. If you hire the right people, ethical people that is, or good people that is, then naturally the startup or the company or the enterprise will have good ethics as such, because not only you convey your own ethics or your own good principle, but if you hire the right people as well, they will come with their own principle, good principle as well, in addition. Principle number 2 is set standard more so than rules, because societies are continuously changing. So there's a lot of laws and so on which eventually get changed with time and so on. So standard is always good, because nothing, not anything will fit into rules. As society change, as the environment change, as technology change, as long as you have some kind of standard, that will change as well. What is right and wrong? Yeah. With standard, it's flexible, where you draw the dividing line between right and wrong. The standard is you don't draw a line per se, whereas rule, there is a line where you cross one side to the other. Standard allows you to shift that line up and down as society change, as the environment change, or as technology change. You can move the standard to the area where it makes sense. Principle number 3, don't let yourself get isolated. If you surround yourself with the right people and so on, not only your ethics, you don't forget ethics and so on, comes from your upbringing through your parents and your friends and your school and so on, from where you actually come from, which town you come from, or which country you come from, and so on. So certain rules and regulations which might be acceptable, which is acceptable to you and people around you, but in other areas it might be regarded as acceptable. So don't get yourself isolated, surrounded with the right or good people, and it's not only your rules and standards and so on, it's all the good people standard added up together. And most important principle is to let your ethical standard or ethical example at all time be absolutely impeccable as such. If you are, then other business would like to deal with you. Yeah. So if you are bad, if you're unethical, eventually people will stop talking to you or stop dealing with you as such. And in business, that can be a bad thing. Because businesses in general, you need to deal with people. You cannot be isolated. Just do some formatting. So ethical responsibility, not only you derive your ethical education and so on from your friends, your family, and from your schools and so on. When you start your startup or when you work in companies, you need to be able to be ethically responsible. It takes a number of different processes. Some kind of ethical consciousness needs to be added to this responsibility, some kind of ethical structures and process, as well as the so-called institutionalized. So it could be a code of conduct as well. So some kind of code of conduct within the institution itself will enforce some kind of ethical responsibility. In addition, as long as the individual or the right person as well have the right ethical consciousness, yeah, it would be a good thing, and it will add to this ethical responsibility as well as some kind of process, continual process and structure within the companies. As I kind of mentioned before, ethics are constantly changing and adapting to new social norms and so on, which constantly are changing anyhow. So you need to have some kind of process in place as well. Some of these rules and some of these code of conduct can be changed. Yeah, as we kind of seen, law can be changed. As society changes, there's a lot of laws which adapts to new society norms as well as ethical norms as well. Ethics and business decisions, in general, there's always will be dilemma between ethics and the business decision. And it can be very, very complex. And we'll go through some of these examples. Business and ethics are complex, are complicated. That's why there's a whole course on business ethics. The complexity of business decision, it can be a dilemma, or it can have conflict of interest and so on as well. So things like ethical decision have many ethical decisions have extended consequences. When you make a decision in business, in general, it tends to have consequences as well. Yeah, whether the consequence is bad thing or good thing, that's another question which we will not go into now. But it will have extended consequences every single ethical decision which you make. Business decision involve ethical question as well. So both is the same. Ethics can affect business in extended consequences, but business decision can also affect or have or involve ethical dilemmas with multitude of alternatives as well. So ethics can affect business, but business decision can also have ethical questions as well. Ethical business often have mixed outcome. Just because you're perfectly ethical in your business does not mean you're good or bad when it comes to the results on the other end. So be careful there as well. So hence it's always, there will be some kind of dilemma. There will be mixed outcome. Most business decisions have uncertain ethical consequences. And most ethical business decisions have personal implication. Yeah, so typically, ethical tends to cost business. Hence, it will have implication or it will have consequences. It's difficult to avoid. So that's why there is always a dilemma between ethics and business decision as such. So let's just summarize into four main themes of the ethical dilemma, which we talked about. These so-called complexity which we face. Yeah, there will be always dilemma, such as implication or consequences. So the four main themes on ethical dilemmas are potential conflict of interest, making ethical decision, it might cost the business money, it may add to costs. So there is a conflict of interest between business decision and ethical decision as such. Personal trait as well, the managers and so on, their ethics or their upbringings can be different from wherever they work or whichever region or whichever country they work. So there'll be a difference in terms of personality and business decision as well, or consequences. As well as level of openness, not all business, especially when it comes to intellectual properties and so on, not every business can be open. They need to protect their secret recipe or their intellectual properties and so on. So not everything can be revealed. So it can be ethical or unethical as such. Yeah, but in terms of protection of their secret recipe and their intellectual properties and so on, there'll be a dilemma there for small businesses or businesses in general. And then there's social responsibility to stakeholders. Who do you work for if you are an enterprise? Do you work for the shareholders or the stakeholders or the customers as such? So there will be a dilemma because each group, stakeholders, customers, or suppliers and so on, where does your priority lies? And you need to be able to make ethical decisions and so on. Given whoever you are working for, or the main sort of like stakeholder for the business itself. So hence there will be dilemma there as well. The stakeholders which you work for and the group which you do not work for. And in general, most of these complexities derive from these four main dilemmas which are facing: conflict of interest, the personality traits, level of openness within companies, and the social responsibility to whoever you need to be responsible to, whether it's stakeholders or suppliers or customers and so on. There will always be some kind of ethical dilemma or consequences. So in general, ethical consideration within corporate entrepreneurships can be done at various different levels. It can be done in terms of the internal network or at the leadership kind of level itself. So managerial dilemmas are things like misdirected rewards or evaluation systems. When it comes to systems, when it comes to structures within the internal network, in terms of managerial dilemmas, restricted communication channels or lack of accountabilities will create dilemmas, or within policies and procedures for managerial dilemmas, there'll be long, complex approval cycles, extensive documentation requirements, unrealistic performance criteria. All this contribute to some kind of consequences. When it comes to leadership issues and so on, managerial dilemmas, things like no vision from the top, or lack of commitment from senior executive, or no role model at the top. But when it comes to people, it's the individual themselves, the parochial biases or tough protection. People will be people, human will be human. And hence they will want to protect their jobs and so on, so the turf protection and so on. Managerial dilemmas also include cultural, things like ill-defined values, lack of fit or value that conflicts with the managers themselves. Yeah, so you have this amoral paradigm which which are the so-called ethical consequences. Solutions, you need to be able to assess the entrepreneurial activities when it comes to the internal network issues. And if it's the leadership issues, you need to be able to have training programs to be able to go through a lot of these problems or dilemmas and how to be able to treat it. But there will always be dilemmas when it comes to ethics and business. That's why it's such a big topic. So to be able to manage all this, you need to have effective corporate entrepreneurships to evolve ethics or moral standards and so on within the companies, or whether it's code of conduct or training programs or diversity programs and so on, to be part of what the companies or the startups is all about. So it's about establishing the needed flexibility as well as innovation, as well as support of employee initiative and risk-taking. Removing the barriers that entrepreneurial middle managers may face when it's more closely aligned to their personal values or their personal gains, and the organization's initiatives, as well as reducing the need to behave or reason to behave unethically. Yeah, so removing a lot of these so-called greed, other reasons to be unethical between their work and their home, and lack of foundations, survival, and reliance on social institution instead of their own decisions as such. And it also include ethical components to training as well, because not everyone will be the same. It's not just code of conduct. You need to be able to constantly train your employees to make sure that what is right, what's wrong, what is ethical, what is unethical. But we also provide guidelines for the institutional compliance or the code of conduct itself, and value components into state-of-the-art corporate entrepreneurship program. So effective corporate entrepreneurships and so on, you need education, you need to have training programs, you need to include an ethical component to the corporate training, you need to remove barriers or organization barriers which encourage unethical behavior. You need to also to provide flexibility as well as innovation to support ethics behavior when it comes to corporate entrepreneurships. All in all, it will create an effective corporate entrepreneur or entrepreneurship type environment. Ethics needs to be lead from the top. So ethical leadership is important by the entrepreneur themselves. Opportunity for ethical leaderships by entrepreneur as an owner has a unique opportunity to display honesty, integrity, as well as ethics in all key decisions. You're basically a role model as well as a founder or the business owner yourself. The owner's action serves as a model for other employees to follow. Yes, so that's why you need to be able to be impeccable when it comes to your ethical or your moral standards. And as a business owner, your value systems is a critical component to the ethical consideration that surrounds the business decision itself. You're the role model in terms of the ethical behavior within a company itself. Last slide before we take a break, a short break. Issue view by the entrepreneur, or the, let me just highlight, change this. So issue view by entrepreneur or business owner themselves. You need to have a it needs to demand strong ethical stance when you see things like a faulty investment advice or favoritism in promotion or acquiescence in dangerous design flaw, misleading financial reporting, misleading advertising, defending healthfulness of cigarette smoking, and so on. As a business owner, you need to have an ethical stance for these things. And it needs to be a strong ethical stance. A lot of these things are not in law and so on, and it depends on your upbringing as well. Different business owner will have different level of ethics when it comes to these things. Greater tolerance regarding these ethical positions. Yes, so these demand strong ethical stance, but you need to have some tolerance on other things as well. Things like padded expense account or tax evasion or collusion with other businesses when it comes to bidding or insider trading or discrimination against women or the minorities, or copying or photocopying books, textbooks, and computer software and so on. I mean, a lot of these things, some of them are not written in laws and so on. It might not be illegal as such, but that's what ethics is all about. Ethics cover a lot more than just what is legal and what is illegal. So hence, it's not defined per se. So each business owner will have their own sense of right and wrong and so on as well. So things which you need to or demand strong ethical stance, and things which need a greater tolerance when it comes to ethical decisions and so on. Okay, so we've covered all of ethics. Yeah, so your midterm exams will cover everything from the slides in lecture 1 up to lecture 2. There will be no question in the midterm exams which test you on things which have not been covered in this courses or these lecture notes, these 2 lecture notes. Yeah, so after the break, I will go through what will be covered and what might not be covered in the midterm exams. Okay, we'll take a 15 minutes break and then we'll carry on after the break. So now it is 2:40. We'll come back at 2:55. Okay, can you hear me? Somebody please respond. Anyone? Anyone, can you hear me? Okay, good, good, good. Some response. Okay, so we just finished ethics, moral standards, and so on when it comes to entrepreneurships. So we have enough information or enough material to do the midterm exams. So now I'll go through the details in terms of midterm exams. Midterm exams will be multiple choice. It will be, let me just share with you my screen first. So it will be multiple choice. It will be of the form of Google form. So what you get is during the exams, I will send out the link to your Google meeting. So the whole exam will be recorded, and you'll access to some kind of Google form, and you get multiple choice. You click on what you believe to be the right answer, and so on. Yeah, so it's relatively quite standard as such. It will be multiple choice in the sense that you get the choice out of A, B, C, D, or E. So one of 5 different choices. The exam will be of closed book form. In fact, this is the detailed exam. So midterm exams, it will be 8 a.m. on the 6th of November 2021. There will be 45 questions. The exam will last 60 minutes. It will be off online form. So you have to have a video camera filming you, and I have to record it for the university. It is school regulation. It is a closed book exam. Your VidCam should be able to view you at your computer. So make sure it's viewing your full head and shoulder and so on. So I want to be able to record that you are not opening any books during the exams. So no talking during exams, no mobile phones during the exams. You're allowed to bring a calculator. I don't know what you're going to use it for, but you're allowed to bring in a calculator if you want. That's no issue. But no dictionary during the exams. So you're going to fill in your email, your full name, and so on, university ID, and so on. And then you get to answer 45 questions. Yeah, there'll be a few sections. Each section will consist of 5 questions. So it is 45 questions. There will be nine sections. This is section 1. There'll be 9 others. So hence there's 10 sections in total. The answer of the form that you choose A, B, or C. Yeah, the answers will, or the question will be shuffled under random as well. But Google form can handle these shuffling or random choices as well as random questions as well. So it's not easy even if you want to copy, even if you sit next to each other. Okay, the exams will cover everything up to, from lecture 1 up to today's lecture. So if you remember, the course website, under file cabinet, it will cover lecture 1C up to lecture 2B. Yeah, all the information, or all the question will be based on these 2 lecture notes. Last night I had some question from some student saying that they cannot access these lecture notes because they cannot download it. Please let me know if you can download or access these lecture notes or other lecture notes itself. Yeah, so that 1 or 2 people are having problems. So please tell me if you're having problems, and I will make sure you have access to all the lecture notes or all the information needed for the midterm exam. Let's go through the lecture notes briefly and tell you what the kind of format is going to be. I have good news for you. Our proposal in terms of the new exam weighting has been accepted by the Dean of the School of Business. So this semester's assessment midterms is only worth 15% of the class, and the remainder, so that's 70% plus the 15%, will be divided among your 3 other assignments, which is your individual assignment, your clean tech assignment, and your e-biz hub assignment. So, like I said, good news in the sense that midterms only worth 15%, okay? 85% will be within your assignments, your 3 assignments, your individual and 2 groups assignment. What will be covered will be things like maybe Edgar Dell question will be there somehow in some form or other. What else is going to be covered during your exams? Well, your assignment will not be covered during your exams, so that's no major issue there. Millennial, maybe, maybe not. Startup process, maybe or maybe not. So what's missing or what is there but should not be there, for example. All these will be covered, middle class, free trade agreements and so on, all these motivations and so on will be there, yeah. Notice that your lecture notes will be of the form of bullet points. Yeah, so especially for multiple choice questions and so on, bullet points makes very good multiple choice questions. Yeah, so you see here, for example, 3 bullet points: what's missing, what's not missing, or what should be there, or what not should be there. So especially when you see wherever you see there are approximately 4 or 5 bullet points. Yeah. If there are 4 or 5 bullet points, it's most likely going to be in the form of a multiple choice question. So anywhere in which you see 4 or 5 bullet points. So here there's 4 bullet points, for example. Essential ingredients include taking calculated risks, venture team, business plan, vision to recognize opportunity, maybe something else, what should not be in the list, for example. So all this will be examinable, survivorship is examinable, ecosystems and so on, not necessarily examinable. None of these relating to my own venture are not examinable. It's just a conflict of interest if I force you to memorize these things. Yeah, it's not necessary. You don't need to memorize people's name or their age or how much capital they put into their companies and so on. That's not examinable. Yeah, that's just for your information per se. All this is not examinable, so ignore slide 40 up to maybe slide 44. Yeah, none of that is not examinable, so you ignore that. Culture, examinable. Stages of development, examinable. All these factor-driven stage, efficiency-driven stage, and innovation stage are examinable. About Vietnam's entrepreneur, latest information, well, as close to the latest as what we can get, 2017, 2018, especially some of these main points will be examinable. Yeah, there's a lot of not so important points, but main points will be examinable, like what's the main driver in Vietnam, yeah, or what is the main reason, or what is the strength, Vietnam's entrepreneur strength, yeah, things like internal market, cultural norms, infrastructure, what are their weaknesses, things like finance education, government programs, and so on, yeah. The main weaknesses when it comes to entrepreneurship in Vietnam. So these things are examinable. Don't worry too much. It's either the top or the bottom is going to be examinable. Things in the middle, most likely not examinable. So when you see a big list, I'll probably list something like what are the main or the top reason for, say, strength in Vietnam. Yeah, so you just need to make sure that whatever should be in the top 5 should be there, or what's in the top 5 but not necessarily is the top 5. Or the other end as well, the weaknesses. What are the weaknesses in Vietnam? Yeah, so at least in the top 5 or the bottom 5, you need to understand the weaknesses and the strength in Vietnam. These statistics and so on are not examinable. These will change year to year. It's not static, anything like that. So not examinable are the percentages, so don't worry too much about that. These research and so on are not examinable, so don't worry too much about that. So these network research, so we ignore slide number 53. Culture, like I said, is examinable. Examinable. Very likely to be examinable, you know, lists of various different, what's missing or what's in the list, and what should be in the list. These are examinable. Things like this is not examinable. These just for your knowledge, just to familiarize yourself. What are Vietnam's strengths and weaknesses? If they are examinable, just look at the top 4 or 5, or bottom 4 or 5 in general. If it's a big list, ignore the middle. How can I examine you in the middle? Yeah, so look at the strength, look at the weaknesses. None of the myths are examinable. So there's myths every sections and so on. I will not be examining you on various different myths. These things are very examinable. They're just lists. Yeah? So 6 school of thoughts. You know, what should not be there, or what's which one is missing, that kind of thing. That's fine. And other things like, for example, these things are very highly examinable. List of 4 things or 5 things typically. These just strengths and weaknesses. So pretty much what you see in the previous slide. Not much different here. I think this was from the 2017-2018 data. So this is wrong. So let me remove this if I remember. Let me just double check. No, this is right. This is with my, and this is the GEM. So maybe I need to paste it across over here. There are 2 different data. Okay, so this is from WinMy's research, and this is from the GEN. GEN is I copied this over, I forgot to mention it, label it correctly. So 2018. Okay. So try to use the latest version if you could. I'm human. I might make mistakes. Yeah. So this is one example of my mistake. That is two different sources. This is from the latest GEM, the Global Entrepreneur Monitors, and this diagram is from Winmai's research. All this, not necessarily examinable, but in terms of strength and weaknesses and so on, this is quite old research, so I will not examine you on very old things. Yeah. On new data, such as the latest data, very likely I will examine on these things. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the top 3 or top 4 or top 5? Or what are the bottom 5? Yeah, what are Vietnam's weaknesses? These are examinable. Integrative approach. In addition to integrative approach, the entrepreneurial assessment approach, as well as the multi-dimensional approach as well. So these things are examinable. Be careful, this list might be examinable, but in general, it's about recognition of the top 4 or 5 or the bottom 4 or 5 examinable. I will not be examining you middle of the list. I don't expect you to memorize everything. As long as you, things like this, I will try to make it obvious. I don't expect you to memorize everything and regurgitate it. But as long as you have kind of a general knowledge, what are the main strengths? Yeah, I will not strictly test you on these things. But I'll make it simple. This slide will not be examinable. Oops, let's just undo this. Will it be examinable? No, I don't think this slide is examinable. So you ignore all these lists, yeah, very long lists. I don't expect you to memorize everything in these lists. Like I said, if I do, then it's only the top, the main top or the bottom, yeah, but like I said, this multidimensional list, I will not examine you. I don't expect you to memorize these things anyway. Entrepreneur, examinable. Definition of entrepreneur, 4 kinds, here's a list of 4, very likely to appear. These kind of table, as long as you understand. The weaknesses and the strength and so on, and actions. Here's another list of 5, yeah, very likely to appear. Yeah. Like I said, anything in the list of 4 or 5, very likely to appear in the form of multiple choice. This is myth, so it's very unlikely to, you ignore this myth. Yeah. Here's another list of 4 things. Yeah. Here's another list of 4 things across here: ecosystem, innovation, venturing, harvesting, private equity, 10th commandment. You can ignore that one. Anything to do with myths and commandments and things like that, principle and so on, are not examinable. It's just for your knowledge, your general knowledge per se. Dunning-Kruger effect, it's likely to appear. What's missing, what's there but should not be there, those kind of things. These biases, very useful, is everyone makes these kind of mistakes. Yeah, so as long as you know or aware of your mistakes, your potential for these biases, then at least you can do something about it. Okay, so that's the end of lecture 1 slides. Let's get to lecture 2 slides. Tips on how to define your co-founders, very examinable. All this information about hacker, hustler, hustlers, very examinable. They're very useful. These are modern kind of things which entrepreneurs manage to find very useful. Yeah, so hacker, hustler, hustlers, they are the people with the right kind of skill sets for most startups. Most startups, you need a manager, which is the or the CEO, which is the hustler. Definitely, you need some kind of technology, whether it's acting or singing or an intellectual property of some sort. So you need a hacker, and you need someone good at sales and marketing and so on. Yeah, so these skills, 3 skill sets, are very, very important among a majority of business out there in the world, in the real world. So very, very examinable. Hackers, hustler, hipsters. Okay, let's move on. Entrepreneur perspective, why you, various different characters you need to be good entrepreneurs. These old statistics are not examinable. There's no need to memorize all these numbers and so on. Yeah, so things change all the time. So these are not, it does not make sense for me to examine you on these things. Things like important characters, oldest child, youngest child, or 2.4, co-founders, those are more likely to be examinable rather than US statistics, but not only US statistics, very old US statistics as well. So very similar to the research by Wing Mai and so on, statistics which are quite old and not too relevant to today's entrepreneurships and startups and so on. I don't want to examine you on these things. I don't want to stress you on these things. It's not that useful to memorize these things. This list of characters, strong characters to be good entrepreneurs. If anything, I will only examine you up to, like I said, top 5 or bottom 5. Yeah. Anything in the middle, unlikely there'll be any question on anything in the middle. There might be question in the top 5 and or bottom 5. Yeah. Anything else? Big factors, 3 factors, very important. You need some kind of understanding of these things. These numbers are quite old, unlikely for me to examine you. This is 1998. Most of you were not born in 1998. Most of you are much, much younger than that. So it's unlikely I will examine you at these kind of statistics. There's no point. This is demonstrated to you so you can have some kind of ideas. Yeah, I'm not that able to examine you on these things. List of 4 things very likely to appear. Yeah, anything like I said, anything in the list of 4 or 5. Yeah, very likely to appear. So in a multiple choice question. Stress, very likely to appear in your exam. Yeah. Here's a list of 4, for example. How to deal with your stress? Yes, that will very likely to appear in some form or other in your multiple choice question. Positive, negative, list of 4 things might be there somewhere. I don't know. I can't tell you everything. Yeah, I can give you hints. Things like Innovations and creativity and so on, examinable as well. About innovations in terms of various different kind of innovation or source of innovation. There's a list there. Well, it's not a list of 4 or 5 things, but at least it is relatively quite important to figure out where your idea is going to come from. It's going to come from other people's problem. If you solve other people's problem, then they will pay you to solve their problem for them. Yeah? So where potential business is going to come from, yeah? Source of innovative ideas. Adapters, innovators, highly examinable. Nature, creativity process, examinable. Most common idea killer, not examinable. I said myths and commandments and common idea killers and so on are not examinable. These are just kind of for your knowledge purpose. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere, examinable. It's about creativity and logics and so on. These things are just an exercise. They are not examinable. What's left? How do you determine left hemisphere or hacker or a right hemisphere hypnosis? Yeah. This is a relatively small list of 4 or 5 kind of characters. Yeah, potential multiple choice question there somewhere. Similar, but very similar characters anyhow. Things like logical, linear, it makes sense. As long as you know it's logical, linear, abstract, analyticals and so on, you know it's a left hemisphere kind of person, things which are non-verbal synthesis, non-rational, and intuitive is going to be right hemisphere. So these are relatively quite obvious. So I can mix things around, what should not be there, what should be there. Innovation, another 4 bullet points here. So potential exam question there. I think you've kind of seen this already. There's a list of 4 things here. This I already mentioned, problems, other people's problems. And more recent are like lecture notes on ethics and social entrepreneurships. That would be examinable as well, not this myths, not examinable. But things like definition of entrepreneurships or social entrepreneurship or intrapreneurships and so on, highly examinable. Social entrepreneurs, you know, different terms for entrepreneurs, things like things like different terminology, things like social entrepreneur, public entrepreneur, civic entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, innovators, or change agents. They're pretty much terms associated with social entrepreneurs. And similarly for entrepreneurs as well, there are many terms for entrepreneurs, on what is an entrepreneur. Separate to that, social entrepreneurs, different level of social entrepreneurs, like different levels of moral, amoral, immoral, kind of ethics and so on as well. So very similar potential ways. Maybe I'll figure out how to question you on these things. List of different topics or sectors to be social values and so on. Is relatively quite small subsets. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. Yeah, so potentially easily can be put into a multiple choice question. We already looked at this, social obligation, social responsibility, social responsiveness. Eco, these relatively quite fresh, and it should be quite fresh in your mind. About the environment will be examinable. Ethics will be examinable. Like I said, everything will be examinable in lecture notes 1 and lecture notes 2, up to and including ethics as of today. Yeah, so ethics will be examinable, 4 quadrants. Oops, various different quadrants. Reason for unethical behavior, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bullet points. So potential to be a multiple choice question there. Most likely not appearing, like I said, myths and commandments and things like that will not be examinable. I don't think this will be, maybe holistic approach. This is not myth, anything like that. This is just common sense. So ethics and so on will be examinable. Ethic and business directions, 4 main themes, examinable. Something like this, too complicated. I don't expect you to memorize everything in something like this. So slide number 60, you can ignore that. It will not be examinable. Effective corporate entrepreneurships and so on, potential examinable. And something like this, not examinable. You ignore the last slide. Okay? Any questions so far on the midterm exam? No question? Yes, cover lecture 1C and 2B. Don't forget to get the latest version. I might have made some mistakes, and I've changed the a few things here and there in these slides. I added everything. I added more to it, but a little bit here, a little bit there. Yeah, but virtually all your midterm exam will be based off lecture 1C and lecture 2B. Yeah. Nothing outside of these two. Any other questions? No? Okay, I'll go through the process anyway. I mean, it's quite a distance away, 6th of November, so that's maybe another 2 weeks away. Yeah, let me just quickly check the dates. 6th of November. Let's see, today is the 26th. 6th of November, it's Saturday morning. Yeah, so I apologize for that. It's university did this scheduling. Okay, so if they say 8 a.m. on the 6th of November, then it is 8 a.m. on the 6th of November. It is. So it's about almost 2 weeks away on the 6th of November, Saturday. Make sure that you have a working video camera. You have to keep your video camera on all the time. Make sure you're in a well-lit room as well. I don't want you to be filming a darkened room with you inside. I need to be able to see you. It's not me as well. The whole exam will be recorded. Yeah, so I will have recording on. So even any issues and so on, the university can always look back to whether you cheated or whatever you do, which breaks the rules or the regulation. The first 10 or 20 minutes of the exam, I will go through each individual on this list here. And I will take a registration, and not only that, I check your ID as well. Yeah, so you need to have your university ID or any ID, relevant ID with your picture on it and your name on it. Yeah, so I need a photo ID of some sort, a relevant photo ID of some sort, like your passport or your driver license, with a picture of you on it and with your name on it, so I can check. So it will all be recorded as well, so I need to check and do all that as part of the university regulation. So I'll go this 10 or 20 minutes. It might take a while because it's not only this particular class, but also my Wednesday class as well, who will be joining the exam. So there will be about 70 students, 70 students in total. So it might take a while to go through each one to check their ID and so on. Once I check the ID and so on and everything is fine, I will check whether everyone has their video camera on and that I can see each individual clearly. Yeah, so no darkened room. Video cameras need to be facing you, and I should be able to see at least from your head down to your shoulder. Yeah, I don't want to see like this, for example, only your eyes and your top of your head. Yeah, or even like this. Yeah, only your body. Yeah, I want to be able to see. Video cameras need to be in a well-lit room, like you see here. But not only that, I should be able to see your head down to your shoulder as well. Once I go through all the ID, and like I said, there's about 70 students in the class, I will send the link to the exam to in-call messaging. Yeah, so very similar to other links which I sent. I will send it. Let's just do something here. http://iutho.com, for example. So I'll send a link on messaging, and you see this link here. You click on the link, it will jump to the exam. Yeah, so let me just do this. The link will be a Google Doc link. Yeah, so very similar to this link here. Yeah, this is the Google form sample. Let you play around with the multiple choice questions. So I will send you a link of some sort. Yeah, most likely it will look something like this. And you click on the link, it will jump to the exam itself, which is this particular exam here itself. Yeah, there will be 10 sections. The first section to fill in your name, email address, university ID. And then the exams will start. Yeah, there will be 45 questions, consists of 45 points. Each question is 1 point. Each section will be 5 questions, so there are 9 sections in total, consists of questions. So 9 times 5 is 45. And the section 1 is just the detail and name and fill in your university ID. Yeah, so by clicking the form, you can pretty much go straight to the multiple choice question, and then the exam will start. I will put on a countdown clock. So you might not see my face here, for example. I will put in down a countdown clock of some sort. So maybe something like this, countdown. How do I change this? Timer? Maybe something here. Countdown online. Not that one. back. This one here. It will be 60 minutes, so 60. I think that's it. A set, and then start. Yeah, so it will count down. Yeah, to 1 hour, and you should be able to see it on your. If you don't have a clock or something to tell the time with you, you should see. It's my face, my pretty face here. You will see a countdown clock. Yeah, so I will kind of switch on to this thing here. So while you do the exams and you want to check the time and so on, then you should be able to see the countdown clock here as well. It will count down to 60 minutes down to 0. I'll give you a warning, a 5 minutes warning. So when you have 5 minutes left, I will say you have 5 minutes left to finish the exams. There's no download. You click on the pretty much link. Yeah. So similarly here, let me just show you. There's no download involved. Everything will be done online. So you need to make sure that you are online. Number one, I should be able to record you online. And number two, the exams are online. So clicking on this link here, for example, will open up the Google form. Yeah, and you fill in your details, your name, for example, university ID. And then you pretty much do the multiple choice question. You read, there'll be a message, what should not be in this list or what is in this list which should not be there. You click on your multiple choice. There'll be 5 choices which you can click from, and it will be shuffled randomly from one person to the next. You click on your choice, there'll be 45 questions in total. There's no extra time needed or extra minute needed to download or upload anything. You just click on A, B, C, D, or E. Does that answer your question? Any other question from anyone else on midterm exam? Okay, I hope that it is clear. Yeah, it should be relatively straightforward. As long as you are online and I'm recording you, like I said, full face, full shoulder, that should be okay. No open, this is a closed, 100% closed book exam. No summary, no documents are allowed. You only come in with your head. You can bring a calculator with you, but it will be pointless, but you're allowed to bring in a calculator, and that's about it. Any other people with a question? No? You're welcome to ask more questions on Zalo if you can think of any other question, okay? On Zalo, I pretty much can answer straight away in case I have not already covered it or in case you think of other questions. But if there's no more question, the only thing which I can do now is to say to you, good luck in your midterm exam. And stay healthy and enjoy enjoy your revision. If no more questions, I'll say my bye-bye now.